Jimmy Thang here with Scott Butterworth. And Scott, you had the chance to check out some PlayStation VR titles recently. Can you?
Yeah. No, just last night I was at the Sony press conference. They did this whole big VR event directly afterwards. They're showing a bunch of stuff that they announced during the press conference, actually. So a lot of games we've already seen, like 100-foot robot golf and Harmonix VR, but also tons of stuff that was just announced last night.
Cool. Can you walk us through some of the biggest titles that you saw?
So let's see. So I saw Final Fantasy. I saw the Final Fantasy 15 VR experience.
Which is in first person, looks like, right?
Yeah,
like
it's
a shooter.
weird. It doesn't really feel like much of a Final Fantasy game. I mean, it's just a straight up like first person shooter experience. Basically, you're fighting one giant boss with the help of some of the other characters from the upcoming game. But you can kind of like warp around the environment. But really, it's just like you have the one move controller and you're aiming at the boss and like just shooting until it dies. And that's kind of the entire experience. Actually.
Do you know if it's going to be multiplayer? Is that why the other characters?
I was asking them about that after the demo, and they really weren't willing to divulge any other information. I asked if there's going to be, more levels or different gameplay, and all of it's to be determined. Even the release date's to be determined. So it was interesting to see those characters kind of up close and personal, and to see all that in VR. But yeah, it didn't really feel like any Final Fantasy game that I've ever played. It was a bit of a weird little demo. So I don't know if it'll actually result in a full game, but that's what last night's experience was. So wasn't super crazy about this experience, but then again, like Final Fantasy in VR, it's kind of unexpected
shooter
to begin
too.
with. Yeah, just shooter gameplay.
And is it like a laser gun? Is it kind of like machine gun? Like what kind of?
Just a pistol. Your only option, at least last night, was just pistol. Actually, another shooter I saw that did have a machine gun though, Farpoint, which they actually led with during the press conference. That was sort of their first VR title that they showed. That one was actually a little bit disappointing too. It's just kind of a very, very straightforward sci-fi shooter. It's just you on a kind of Mars-looking, rocky, dusty planet, shooting a bunch of bug, alien type of things.
Okay.
The environments were pretty believable. It was really cool to get to walk around, and it does have this crazy peripheral that was just announced. It's basically the successor to there was like, what was it, the Sure Shot, the Move Sure Shot, back when the PlayStation Move was a thing during the PS3 days.
Sure.
It's kind of a version of that. It's like this rifle peripheral, and it actually has a joystick and a D-pad on it, so you use that to maneuver through the environment, but you still aim and shoot using the trigger and the headset.
I know we were talking the other day, you said Batman was surprisingly
Batman
awesome.
was surprisingly cool. So for anybody that's played the Arkham games, if you know like the detective sections where you're analyzing a crime scene, it was basically that. But in VR, so you could actually view a crime. Yeah, exactly. It's all in first person, so you could view the crime from multiple angles. Kind of the same thing as Final Fantasy, where there were certain spots around the environment that you could warp to, but because it wasn't action, it didn't actually feel as limiting. You could basically just like scrub through the playback by twisting your wrist with the move controller in your hand. So the whole experience is framed as basically a murder mystery. Where you're trying to solve the murder of Dick Grayson, which is kind of a cool narrative conceit. According to the devs, it's only about an hour-long experience, but what I played so far was actually like pretty cool.
What else did you check out?
Let's see. Oh, another big one was Resident Evil. That was great. So for anybody that saw the conference, that room that you see in that trailer, that you're kind of like walking through this derelict house with like peeling wallpaper and all that kind of stuff, that's basically what the demo was. I think this is actually the same level that's playable on the downloadable demo on PSN, but I got to play it in VR. So it's really cool. You play with the DualShock 4, so it's about what you would expect from the controls and the movement and all that, but you actually can look around the environment and you feel a little bit more immersed actually being in first person in the world. It's kind of hard to feel too scared when you're standing around a bunch of other people in a giant room, so I don't know if the immersion is really going to make the experience any scarier. It's kind of hard to say, but it was definitely cool getting to like explore this whole environment in first person in VR.
I can't even play like horror games like on a straight flat monitor, so let alone like in VR. Yeah, that's like no for me, thanks.
I think the last game that I would probably want to talk about, sort of number 5 to round out the list, was Psychonauts VR. For anybody that doesn't know Psychonauts, the original game came out, I think, like a little over 10 years ago, and they finally announced they're doing a full sequel, but they're also doing a separate standalone VR game that kind of links the two. It's called Rhombus of Ruin, so they were showing that last night as well, and it's really cool. It's like all the original voice actors, all the writing still done by Tim Schafer, so it feels very much like a Psychonauts game, but the way they kind of get around the gameplay, since the original game was more of a platformer, you're basically, it's a seated experience.
First person.
First person, and you can transfer your consciousness to different characters around the room.
Nice.
So it functions as a bit of a traversal mechanic because everyone's kind of situated in different parts of the environment.
Yeah.
So if you jump into their mind, you can suddenly view the room from their perspective.
And it makes sense within the context of the game's narrative as well.
Yeah, totally, because it's all about, psychics, basically. The game is about people with psychic abilities. So yeah, you have like a clairvoyance ability, but you can also light things on fire with your mind or move things with your mind. So it's kind of like a puzzle game meets the humor and writing of the original Psychonauts. So
it's escape the room kind of thing. You got to figure out puzzles to progress and.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, you move the experience along by solving puzzles. I don't know that I really had to escape anything. The scene that I played was actually took place immediately after the end of the first game, and the puzzles were fun. It was really cool to get to kind of move stuff with my mind. I mean, I could pick stuff up with the controller, but then it would actually move as I looked around the room.
Was it using the PlayStation Move controllers or the?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
Man, like I said, there was a ton of other stuff, but for me, those were the 5 kind of biggest games that a lot of people would want to hear about.
Awesome. For more E3 coverage, stay tuned to GameSpot.com.